So of course time isn't real, but today we'll pretend it is. This may be the greatest Mike Leach story of all time. Now this story mysteriously appeared on a Texas Longhorns fan forum back in 2004 and recirculated after Leach's passing last year. It's all true, and the original poster even has a photo to prove it. I think it's awesome because it demonstrates a trait that Leach had that is pretty rare. A superpower, as Joel Klatt calls it.
The superpower of the question, why not?
On and off the field, he had the unique ability to say, why not, when others so often fold to convention. So the wife and I are cruising around Pearl Harbor, taking in the sights and sounds of such a solemn place. For those of you who have been there, you know that there's more to it than just the Arizona. There's a museum and other assorted sights. Well, one thing was an old submarine named the Bowfin. In any case, the whole thing was pretty cool, getting to walk through a submarine used in World War II. So we're above decks, and that's when I happen to catch a flash of red flying off a kid's head. I look over, and sure enough, his hat had just blown into the harbor. Bummer, I think. Well, his father just stares down into the water and scratches the back of his head as the family stands wordlessly around him. Nice looking family. I think dad, mom, 2 daughters, and a son, if I remember correctly. Well, a light bulb goes off over Dad's head. He looks to the wife and says, "I think I can reach it." There's no way in hell he's going to reach it. No, seriously, here, I think if I hang off the railing, I can reach it. Just hold on to my foot. At this point, he looks as though he's going to actually climb over. Chuckling to myself, I elbow the wife. Look at this. This dude who looks like Mike Leach is fixing to be swimming. Should be entertaining. Wife looks over, looks at me with a cocked eyebrow. John, that is Mike Leach, she says. No way, I think. I look over. Light bulb goes off above my head. Sure enough, that is Mike Leach. Now this is going to be immensely more entertaining than I originally thought. Honey, I don't think you're going to reach it, pretty wife says. Dad, don't worry about it, well-behaved son says. Dad scratches the back of his neck and stares down at the forlorn hat bobbing in Pearl Harbor. Again, a light bulb goes off. No, he says, turning with a purpose. They have something. And walks down the deck, right past me and my googly-eyed, easily starstruck wife, right past the Filipino blue-checkered shirt-wearing museum attendant, and right into a yellow taped-off area. He proceeds to move some buckets and other assorted janitorial gear and comes upon his goal. He starts pulling out this long-ass pole. This pole is about 20 feet long, I swear to God, with a pool net on the end. He turns really quickly with this monstrosity and nearly bowls over a Japanese tourist who is gawking at him. His wife says something along the lines of, "Oh boy, go coach go," in a tone I only can translate as moderate, unsurprised bewilderment. She turns to the daughter. Your dad, he just doesn't care, does he? Meanwhile, back at the Filipino blue-checkered shirt-wearing museum attendant, a look of abject horror has conquered her face. She watches as he walks back past her, holding this ridiculous pole over his head. Suddenly it dawns on her that it's her job to stop this man. Sir, you can't do that. What are you doing? Stop. Sir, please. Mike Leach does not hear her. He reaches the point where the hat overboard has occurred and dips the pole into the harbor, fishes out the hat. He stands there triumphantly for a moment, holding this pole over his head, as tourists stare at him with wonderment. Dave Emmerich worked with Mike Leach for several years and tells a lot of great stories about him. He remembers one time Mike Leach had just returned from a party in Phoenix, and Dave asked him, "How'd the party go?" And Leach said, "Oh, pretty good. Charles Barkley picked me up." And Dave said, "He picked you up?" And Leach said, "Yeah, he picked me up. We're friends." So Dave said, "Picked you up from where? Where were you?" And Leach says, "No, he literally picked me up and carried me around the party."
My favorite part about Leach is that they ask him whatever and he'll just go on any subject. Like they asked him at one point to rank the Pac-12 mascots.
The Bruin definitely formidable. The duck might lose interest and just fly away and get out of there, which may be good advice under the circumstances. The Husky, no chance. You have to get one of those Harry Potter activists to read up on how you kill a sun devil, because there's a lot of outside stuff there. The Trojan, does he have a horse or is he on foot? Does he have a bow and arrow or just his sword? The Beaver, well, we'll see how long that beaver can hold his breath. The Ute, again, we're back to, is he on horseback? Does he have a bow and arrow? Did he trade for a rifle? I mean, because if that Ute's got a rifle, there's some definite problems. A buffalo's going to be pretty hard to tangle with. I mean, a buffalo's utterly outstanding.
And then his wedding advice. Have you seen that?
I've told all my kids, I'll give you $10,000 extra if you elope. So far they haven't done it, but I would too.
Tracked a raccoon one time in the snow. It was residential enough. I was curious where the sucker lived, and so I walked about half a mile out of my way to sort that out, And, there's fresh raccoon tracks, and he'd been digging in somebody's garbage. So I followed the tracks, and I don't even know if these people know it, but he lives right in the back of their house in a bunch of brush and trees,
Oh, this is one of my favorites. This guy, Taylor Potts, was quarterback at Texas Tech, and he started out the year as the starter and got in a little slump. Leach says he wasn't pulling the trigger like he should be. So Leach changed the guy's name to Nick from Taylor, tried to convince him that he had an alter ego. He said, Taylor is indecisive. Taylor overthinks things. Taylor doesn't pull the trigger. But Nick has a free mind. Nick goes through his reads. Nick pulls the trigger. And he called the equipment manager late one night before a game and said, I want you to put Nick on the back of his jersey. And then you can find pictures of Taylor Potts playing with a jersey that says Nick.
Are you serious? That's hilarious.
Apparently they beat 10th ranked Oklahoma with Nick on the back of his jersey. So apparently he was invited to Matthew McConaughey's wedding. They were good friends. Dave Emmerich tells this story. He said he asked him after the wedding how it was, and he says, yeah, I saw McConaughey but didn't get to spend a lot of time with him. But turns out he spent the whole night with McConaughey's brother, Rooster. They were just talking, just drinking and talking till like 9 a.m., he says.
Rooster McConaughey, yeah.
Rooster said both of us like to cuss and like to hear ourselves talk. So we didn't ask each other too many questions, because if you did, it gave the other guy the floor. Well, Lincoln Riley tells another story about that at Texas Tech after a game or something. Lincoln had to get a ride from him, and they're going down the road, and Leach gets a call and shows Lincoln the caller ID. It's Matthew McConaughey. And they get to talk, and he says Leach just gets so, just oblivious to everything else, just single-minded. So he's just unaware of the traffic around him, and he switches lanes once and like cuts off this pickup truck. And then the truck pulls up alongside him, all mad, kind of yelling at him. And Leach just goes, "Oh, hey, Mike Leach." He just thinks they're fans. He's like, "Hey, Coach Leach, good to see you." Yeah, there's great stories out of his quarterback meetings that, he'd just get going off on tangents about whatever. The quarterbacks kind of came to know, you don't, if you want to get out of there, you don't ask him anything that can set him off.
Because if he gets hooked on a story, we're going to be 30 minutes late to practice. That happened multiple times. The whole team would be out on the field waiting for us to practice, and he'd be in there telling us about the best pizza place in Portland.
So they had to kind of train the new guys on what, we're about done, don't say something that's going to get him going for a couple hours on whatever topic.
Pirates.
Yeah.
That's funny. Football related or?
No, just
anything.
Basically non-football related. I mean, wouldn't really talk about football. It doesn't sound like a whole lot.
He seemed sometimes bored talking about college football. Whenever we would interview him, you just didn't know where it was going to go.
Apparently he'd just, he'd pull up the film, but he'd just get going on something. He'd just play the play. He's just talking the whole time. He'd play it, then rewind it, play the same play again as he's as he's talking about whatever movie he just watched, or Native Americans. James Whalen, a Kentucky receiver, said, I made a mistake in a game, and he came up to me. He was getting after me pretty good. I said something like, Rome wasn't built in a day. And he looked at me, and his eyes got big, and boy, he got pissed. And Leach said, if we were in Rome, I'd feed you to the f***ing lions. This is a Washington State safety. Says we were in crunch time. The defensive coordinator called a timeout so they could strategize. So the whole defense is huddled up right off the sideline. They're trying to hear what defensive coordinator has to say. So he's in there with the whiteboard trying to tell us what's going on. And then Coach Leach starts barging through the whole huddle. It's taking him forever. It takes him like 20 seconds to get all the way to the middle of the huddle. And then he just goes, all right, listen, everybody, listen up. And they were all expecting him to say something pretty big. And he just goes, don't let them get a first down. And he walks away. Just tried to simplify the game at all levels, I guess. Luke Falk, Washington State quarterback, said one year they were down 24-7 at halftime to Oregon State.
As we were playing Oregon State in 2016, we were just getting our ass kicked. It was 24-7 at halftime. One, I think I'm going to get an earful, and I think the whole team's going to get an earful, and that he's going to switch things up. I go in the coach's office or the coach's locker room, and he's on Rosetta Stone practicing Spanish. And I just started laughing. And then he's like, there's nothing these guys are doing. We just got to go out there, play calm, and kick their mother effing ass. And then he goes back to practice Spanish. We ended up coming back that game.
Steve Spurrier Jr. says when they were at Oklahoma, Leach would always bring 2 slices of bread in a plastic bag. And one day he watched him, and Leach just spent like 2 minutes wadding up a slice of bread into a tight ball and then just swallowed it whole. And he asked him what he's doing, and he says his wife says since he drinks so much coffee, it's not good for his stomach, and he needs to eat 2 slices of bread a day. But he said he hates bread, so I just ball it up and swallow it.
Did you come across the story where he used to just call people? He would just call random numbers and see how long he could talk to them to get them to stay on the phone. I think he was maybe in college, and he would just randomly call numbers and see how long he could get the person to talk.
Lincoln Riley wrote a great story about how Leach would just talk to anyone and really had no concept of time. My first or second year as an assistant at Tech, I was doing some work in Coach Leach's office when his cell phone rang. He picked it up and said, "Hey, how's it going?" And then he listened for a second and asked, "Where are you calling from?" He kept talking on the phone, and I eventually sort of tuned out. Now, a short phone conversation for Coach Leach is an hour. So he was talking about this and that, and I was kind of hunkered down working on my own stuff. At some point, the call got dropped. They must have lost reception. Coach said, "Can you hear me? Are you there?" Then he closed his old school flip phone, swung it back open, and redialed. He said, "Hey, sorry I lost you." And then they resumed their conversation for another 30 minutes or so before Coach finally hung up. After he was done, we started talking, and I said, "Hey, Coach, who was that on the phone?" And he said, "Oh, they had the wrong number." People say he was a night owl, like he'd be up all night and then always get into the office super late.
It's kind of the opposite you think about. I mean, I feel like if I think about these coaches like Nick Saban or someone, he's probably in his office at 5 a.m. at least.
Yeah, it's just totally opposite. He actually moved to Key West after he was fired from Tech and moved there with his whole family and everything. And they didn't even have a car down there. They would walk or bike everywhere and like take a taxi sometimes if they had to get a lot of groceries or something.
That's crazy. Yeah, he talks about Key West, some of the characters he'd meet down there. It just seems like his type of place. I bet of the list of coaches who you would want to have a beer with, he would probably be number one.
Can you have a beer with this guy? Maybe you should have ran for president. That's what they always say.
Yeah.
Is he a guy you'd want to have a beer with?
He probably would have been. I mean, he's a sharp guy.
Yeah.
Probably would have, good talker. Probably would have been a good politician.
Stumbles a lot though.
Well, yeah, he's not the
Most articulate.
arm in the world, but yeah,
Gets where he's going.
takes him a while. But that's all part of the fun.
I think it's the greatest, and is a real well. And then I just figured, I'm going to and so with that, and then they sent him to a nut house there in New Jersey, or after that. So I didn't see him anymore. So then I'm thinking, well, I don't, but I want to. Is that the 5-minute sign? 5 minutes in. Well, and then if the guy falls asleep, of course you dump it over his head.
Another great story is when Leach was interviewing for the job at Washington State. Bill Moose, the Washington State athletic director, flew down to Key West to interview him, and he said they set it up as a casual interview, and to Bill that meant, just not a tie, but still suit and shine shoes and all that. And then Leach shows up in old white V-neck t-shirt, cargo shorts, sandals, a 3-day beard, and a styrofoam spitter. And he was 15 minutes late. So in 1999, Mike Leach was the offensive coordinator at Oklahoma for 1 year before he got the Texas Tech head coaching job. And during this year, they're playing Texas. And Texas is a lot better at the time. This was Bob Stoops' first year at Oklahoma, and they were pretty bad the year before. And they're looking for any advantage they can get. And so Leach and a couple of assistants draw up a fake play sheet, and they laminate it and everything, kind of use terminology that, sounds like their own, but it's easy enough to understand. And they have a player fake drop this on his way to the locker room, make it look like an accident, and then a Texas assistant picks it up and it makes its way to the Texas defensive coordinator. And it's not just random wrong plays.
Yeah, he would design it to where it was believable, but almost like some play that would get the defense in the exact wrong spot for the play he was actually going to run.
And it worked, is the crazy thing. Because, they went up 17-0, and they ended up losing, I think, 38-28. But still.
Yeah, that's a great story.
Someone said, we thought it was real because the alternative was even more unbelievable, that someone would take the time to draw up an entire fake play sheet and drop it.
We all thought it was real because we thought that the alternative would be just so far-fetched. That somebody would go through the trouble to create a fake call sheet and actually leave it and drop it, where we would find it.
Don't ever try to pick up my scripts or steal my signals, because you don't know what may be in store for you.
Another good story from when he was at Texas Tech is when he made just a student who won a field goal contest. He turned him in to the team's full-time kicker.
Leach gets them wherever he can. When he needed a kicker, he didn't go to Florida or Oklahoma. He went to the stands.
They had this contest after the third quarter they do all the time, kick a field goal, kick a 35-yard field goal, win free rent at this local place. And this kid, Matt Williams, gets selected for the contest, who had kicked in high school before, so had good form and everything. And he goes out there and just nails this 35-yarder right down the middle, plenty of distance. And Leach tells a trainer to go stop him and tell him he wants to talk to him. Tech was a great team that year, but apparently was having kicking troubles. So Leach ends up making this guy the new full-time kicker. He goes 9 for 9 on extra points the very next week and remains Texas Tech's kicker for the next 3 years.
That's classic.
Leach just said, that's a lot of pressure, nailing a 35-yarder in front of a stadium of people. I figured if he can do that, he can kick extra points for us. And actually, one of my favorite stories comes from when he was at Iowa Wesleyan. So he was offensive coordinator, O-line coach, a bunch of stuff at a small school, but he was also sports information director. After games, he would just call up the local papers, anyone who would listen really, to go over the game, give them the play-by-play and the results, because he wanted to get the program out there. They were scoring all these points and winning games. He wanted to get everything out there for recruits, so they could print it the next day. But the PR director, who was kind of his boss in that role, got mad at him that he was calling these papers and media outlets with the results, because apparently how they'd always done it was mail out the results so that all the weekly papers had a fair shot at getting them at the same time. But then, no one would print anything till Wednesday or Thursday. And at that point, that last Saturday's long forgotten. So Leach was just doing everything he could to get the word out about his team. And one time they had a quarterback who was breaking all these records because they were passing all the time. And Leach got Iowa Wesleyan College printed up in USA Today.
Like call USA Today as we had this quarterback breaking these records, and I'd say, Dustin Dewald did this, and Dustin broke this record and that record.
And you'd think this would make the PR director happy, but she was mad at him because he wasn't following her orders and doing it the way she thought it was supposed to be done.
Pretty soon she gets upset, says, you're in trouble. I told you not to do that. Mail it out. Well, yeah, look, mail it out by Thursday. Maybe they'll print it, I said, well, listen, the Sports Information Office got us into USA Today 3 times this year, and your office couldn't get us into USA Today if there was a mass murder on campus. And so then they banned me from it was kind of like 2 Live Crew. I was banned. And I was banned from campus for 3 days.
Okay, and now the moment we've all been waiting for. Craig James killed 5 hookers. So this is a rumor that kind of came to light in the midst of the incident that ended up getting Leach suspended and then fired from his head coaching position at Texas Tech.
You can't do what Mike Leach did to our son and get away with it. Not in the United States of America.
These lies have led to my firing this morning. I steadfastly refuse to deal in any lies and am disappointed that I have not been afforded the opportunity to make the truth known. I will not tolerate such retaliatory action. Additionally, we will pursue all available legal remedies. These actions taken by Texas Tech have severely damaged my reputation and public image. In addition, Texas Tech has caused harm to not only my family, but the entire Red Raider Nation and all of college football.
Did this school strive for honor in the way that it can, Coach Leach?
We're sick. This is sickening. It's awful. As much as he's done for the university and he's done for Texas Tech, and to be treated this way.
All we want is answers. We know Coach Leach isn't coming back, but we want answers to why it happened the way it did, what really happened behind the closed doors, and why the administration seems to be shrouded in secrecy.
So Craig James is a former NFL player, and in 2009 was an ESPN broadcaster, and he had a son, Adam James, who was a receiver on Mike Leach's Texas Tech team. And late in 2009, after the season was over and they were preparing for the bowl game, there was an incident that led to Leach's suspension and then ultimately his firing from Texas Tech. So what happened was Adam James sustained a light concussion in practice one day. Leach doesn't know this, but the next day he shows up to practice in street clothes, a backwards hat, sunglasses, and he's just walking around the field. Leach asks trainers why he's doing that, and they let him know that the doctor said he had a light concussion. So this is where the story split in 2 completely different directions. So I'm not quite sure where the truth lies. I'm inclined to believe Leach's side a little more, just because when most of the facts and testimonies come out, it pretty much vindicates him of any wrongdoing. And the picture becomes pretty clear that he had 2 pretty powerful forces working against him that wanted him fired before all this happened. You had Craig James, who is not happy about the amount of playing time his son is getting, so already has it out for Leach. And you also have the Texas Tech chancellor and administration, who it is revealed were like conspiring on ways to get Leach fired so they didn't have to pay him the contract he was owed. So anyways, this whole mess came from reports that Craig James was spreading that alleged that Mike Leach had Adam James locked in a tiny pitch black equipment shed and forced him to stand up for the entire 3-hour practice. So the whole incident is over this alleged mistreatment of a player by Coach Leach. In Leach's version, he asked trainers to take Adam somewhere out of the light where he would be safe because he was sensitive to light because of his concussion, and just so he wouldn't be a distraction to practice walking around the field in his street clothes. So the trainers took him to a nearby equipment garage where there was an ice machine. It was like a size of a 2-car garage, plenty of places to sit. It was a place where the offensive line would kind of hang out during practice in between drills, stuff like that. So that's Leach's side. In Craig James' version of the story, he claims Leach was much more vengeful. Who knows? So in Craig James' version, Leach ordered the trainers to lock Adam in a pitch black, tiny equipment shed and forced him to stand for 3 hours. And Leach appointed a trainer as like a guard to the shed to make sure Adam didn't try to leave or sit down. So James uses his position at ESPN, and he also hires a PR firm to help push his side of the story. So there's all this circulating out in the media, and it's hard for Leach to get his side of events out there before all the facts are able to come out. And with all the media attention this is getting, Texas Tech suspends Leach and tries to make him sign a letter to admit that he made a mistake and that he won't do it again. But Leach refuses to sign anything because he says he never did anything wrong in the first place.
What did Texas Tech want you to do to rectify the situation?
I was never presented with anything. The only thing I was ever presented with from Texas Tech was in a meeting. And this was with the president and the AD. In a meeting, basically there was a bunch of statements on, players are to be treated this way, that way, and the other way, which I agreed with for the most part. And then the other was failure to do that, you can be penalized the following ways. They wanted me to sign the paper, and I saw no reason to sign it. I mean, I don't mind. You can put it in my file. You can do whatever you want, but nothing about my contract or America would compel me to sign it. Me and everybody in my program is completely innocent of anything.
So then Texas Tech ends up firing Leach, citing insubordination because he refused to sign the letter, and also because he filed for a restraining order against the suspension so that he would be able to coach the upcoming bowl game, because that initial suspension took him out of the bowl game. So it ends up Leach is never paid for the 2009 season that he completed, or compensated at all for the remaining 4 years he was owed on his contract, because Texas Tech fired him with cause, they claimed, for this incident.
They talk about they had some investigation or something. They never had an investigation. They lied about having an investigation, and then they won't produce the documents to prove they had an investigation. Let's go ahead and see it. And then, of course, it's going to illustrate they lied to the fans and everybody else. Well, it just goes to show you how Kent Hance and some of his little cronies, how sleazy those guys are.
What pressure did you find that Mike Leach had put on trainers and or players to return to the practice field or to games when they've been injured?
Well, I'm not at liberty to go into that at this time, and that will be an issue that will come out later.
Anybody who thinks that we asked to go through this, think again. This is not what we were hoping for at all with Adam's career at Texas Tech. This is all a result of what happened to Adam a couple of weeks ago. And I've tried to stay on target with that when I visit with people like you. Steve, he had a concussion. The doctor diagnosed it as a concussion. It's the actions that the coach took against Adam that forced us as a family to do what we did.
What do you think a coach's role is in terms of deciding how an injured player is to be handled?
I think you defer to the doctor, which brings up a good point. I have a statement by Dr. Michael Fye, who's the
who's the doctor that treated Adam James and diagnosed him with a concussion. And the most important line on this statement says, according to the information given to me, no additional risks or harm were imposed on Adam by what he was asked to do. Okay, and I'm going to read it again because I think that's important, and that's the most important issue on this.
We didn't ask to go through this, I promise you. You know, we continue to be a victim of something, and our family's going through a lot right now, far more than we ever wanted to go through. We didn't want any of this.
So afterwards, all the facts begin to come out, and it's revealed that Adam was not locked in a tiny shed or closet or anything like that. Under deposition, Adam says that he just kind of made up this story because he thought it would be funny, and him and his dad share the same sense of humor. But even though Leach is vindicated, he can't get anywhere in the courts trying to recoup what he's owed, because apparently Texas is the only state out of all 50 states that still has the ability to exercise what they call sovereign immunity, which means the state can basically claim sovereign immunity on anything, which allows them to break a contract without recourse. And it's not really intended to apply to a for-profit, big-time college football program. But since Texas Tech is a state institution, they can exercise this sovereign immunity. So Leach is never able to recoup anything he's owed, even though he was fired without cause. So it's just kind of a whole mess. But the really tragic thing about it is that it was kind of during the peak of Leach's program at Texas Tech. It was his first head coaching job, and over the past 9 years, he had taken this historically weak program and built it into somewhat of a powerhouse, at least relative to what it was. And then he was just fired because of this. And it took him out of coaching for 2 years because his name was kind of blacklisted for new jobs. You know, people didn't want to deal with all the lawsuits and the rumors surrounding this until he could be more fully vindicated. So unfortunately for Craig James, in the aftermath of this, just due to all the attention that this brought him, it actually came to light that he may or may not have killed 5 hookers when he was a student and football player at SMU. And it's probably not true, but who knows? A lot of times there is a little truth to the rumor. So I'm not a journalist. I'm not quite sure what happened in this case. I would say it's probably likely he did not kill 5 hookers, but it was pretty funny. These rumors came around again when he ran for senator a couple years later, and he had to address them and say it's just a smear campaign or whatever. And he ended up getting 3% of the primary vote. There was a hilarious poll a Dallas newspaper ran asking who would you rather vote for Senator Mike Leach or Craig James, and it was 96% to 4%. And one time Mike Leach signed a copy of his book with the abbreviation for Craig James killed 5 hookers. So to close out, here's the ending to the story about the hat in the water that we opened up with. In any case, I met him in the museum. Real nice guy. I waited for him to get some separation from his family because I don't want to be the annoying guy who interrupts family time. I turn around in the museum and he's right there looking at some medals. Family's nowhere in sight, so I say, "Coach, you mind if I get a picture?" He looks up at me, smiles, says, "Absolutely. You from Texas?" "Austin," I say. "I'm a Longhorn." He says, "They got a lot of you down there. Somebody fills up all those seats in that stadium every time we're down there." We exchange a few more pleasantries, and I'm ready to let him get back to his family. Don't want to be annoying or anything. "Real nice meeting you, Coach," I say. "Yeah, we got you up in Lubbock this year, though. Should be a good game," he says. "Well, we don't seem to play that well in Lubbock," I reply. "It's always a good game when we play Texas," he says. "Yeah, kind of a rivalry," I say. "Well, A&M seems to be more of our rival right now," he says. "They don't seem to like you all very much right now," I say. He chuckles. I tell him there's nothing we enjoy more than watching his Red Raiders beat the Aggies. He looks at me. I told him good luck, except against us, and he looked at me again and said, "We'll need it." I think he wanted to laugh or talk more about college football. He really seemed flattered that he was recognized so far from home. But real nice guy, just seemed exactly like the Mike Leach you see on TV following a football game. Just kind of in his own little world. He was such a gentleman and was keen to talk my ear off. Like many of the stories in this thread, that was him. It wasn't a put on. I met him for 10 or 15 minutes of my life, and I'll never forget the impression he made on me. Not just the skimmer in the hat, but just how much time he had for me to discuss football, the museum we were in, etc. I never want to be that guy who takes people away from their family, but he never made me feel weird for talking to him. He made me feel weirder for ending the conversation. Like he had so much more to be said, and he actually wanted to say it to me. Like I was that important in that minute, even though he didn't know me from the museum lady hollering at him. But he didn't care. That experience, as trivial as it was and makes for a funny story, did change the way I thought about things in a way and made me more closely follow the dude through his career. They always say never meet your heroes. But he wasn't my hero when I met him. He was just a coach that was kind of quirky and annoying because his teams were always a pain in the ass. But he was a presence. And we are all now lesser that he's gone. R.I.P. Coach.
What do you consider treasures in your life?
Obviously, family, the spiritual stuff, loyalty to friends, and that type of thing. But one of the most important things is that it captures your curiosity, something that drives your curiosity and makes your mind turn and kind of opens things up a little bit so that, just broadens the dimension of what you're thinking about.
All right, thanks for watching today. We certainly appreciate it. We're going to be doing our best, hopefully, to exercise a little curiosity and uncover a few neat folks on this channel. 54 more folks, actually. This was number 1 of 55, so there'll probably be a lot of misses, but hopefully we find a few cool stories, and hopefully we'll get a little better along the way.